On the day my mother arranged my marriage, my uncle the emperor asked me to choose a husband, and he would bestow a marriage upon me. Without the slightest hesitation, I immediately chose Gawain, the son of the great general. Everyone was shocked. Who in the capital did not know that Benedict's legitimate daughter was infatuated with Percival, the son of the emperor? She had made it clear since her coming-of-age ceremony that she would marry no one but him. In my past life, I had married him as I wished, only to find that on the very day after our wedding, he intended to take my illegitimate cousin as his concubine. My father and mother refused, and then swiftly arranged my cousin's marriage to a scholar. Percival, believing it was my instruction, hated me ever since. He spent his days indulging in the company of other concubines, continually bringing new women into the palace. Some of these women resembled my cousin in appearance or voice. The concubines and palace ladies who tormented me never caught his attention or stopped him. On the day he ascended to the throne, he sent me a decree of deposing and a cup of poison wine. In this new life, I refused to be humiliated by him again or to serve as a pawn in his affair with my cousin. But on my wedding day, he barged in as if possessed. His eyes were bloodshot. "Don't marry him, please." I had just stepped through the palace gates when a sharp arrow flew, embedding itself less than an inch away from the doorframe. A chill ran down my spine, and everything from my past life seemed to flash before my eyes. Percival, with his bow still in hand, grinned triumphantly at the arrow. Behind him, his noble companions laughed uproariously, clapping and cheering. "The Crown Prince's archery is truly masterful," they exclaimed. I wanted to ignore them, but due to my position, I was forced to approach him and bow respectfully. "Your Highness, I pay my respects. What are you doing in the palace?" he asked, still looking down at me from his superior position. I met his gaze. My uncle, the emperor, heard that I was considering marriage and summoned me to the palace to arrange a union for me. At this, the noble young man grew excited. "It seems the Crown Prince is soon to be married. There will be no controversy over the succession then. As the first daughter of the Duke of Benedict, my marriage would carry great weight. If I married a commoner, he would be granted noble titles. If I married the son of a high official, he would become the most powerful minister, second only to the emperor. If I married a prince, he would become the heir to the throne." When they heard that the emperor intended to arrange my marriage, they all assumed that I would choose no one but the Crown Prince, Percival. Naturally, they gathered around him like flies to honey, hoping to gain favor with the future heir. He reveled in the attention, always enjoying the feeling of being the center of attention. Yes, Cully too. Everyone knows that the legitimate daughter of Benedict has only ever wanted to marry our Crown Prince. Since she could remember, she has been shouting that she would marry no one but him. Benedict is an honest man, proud and upright, but to think his daughter would be so shameless, pursuing the Crown Prince all the way into the palace. Someone else remarked, "The memory of that poisoned wine from my past life made my grip tighten around the handkerchief embroidered with peach blossoms." As Percival nocked a second arrow, I deliberately let my handkerchief fall to the palace floor. Bending down to pick it up, I revealed the shallow scar on the back of my neck, one that I had received when I blocked an assassin's attack at the age of 13. At that time, he had cradled my face and promised, "Eloin, I will never fail you." The arrow swerved by 3 inches and buried itself deeply into the golden brick crack at my feet. The laughter of the nobleman stopped abruptly. Percival's bowstring vibrated with a hum. I gazed at the dark red stain seeping through the brick crack, suddenly remembering how, in my past life, when he killed my personal maid, the blood had spread in much the same way. My uncle intends to find me a husband. I straightened up, lightly dusting the handkerchief and holding it firmly once more. I must take my leave now. The red lacquered palace doors suddenly opened, and the eunuch's sharp voice pierced the stillness, announced the presence of Benedict's legitimate daughter. Having received my uncle's favor, I left the palace and returned to the mansion. Passing by the back garden, the late spring wind swept up the fallen petals, and a few crushed peach blossoms lay scattered on the cobbled path. Turning past the Koi pond, a woman's soft laughter floated from behind the rock garden. Percival's dragon-patterned robe sleeve peeked out from behind the Tahu stones. Its corner caught around my cousin Clara's waist, where she wore a double-fish pendant, the very same one my mother had gifted me on my coming of age. "Your Highness. Try this." Clara bit into half a lotus pastry, leaving a lip print on Percival's fingertips. "I made the filling with morning dew." As she spoke, the sleeve of her robe slipped down, revealing a faint sign of her virginity on her wrist. Seeing me approach, my cousin hurriedly stood, her expression one of fear and weakness, as though she were the innocent, delicate girl she appeared to be. Percival, however, paid no attention. He gently reassured Clara and then walked directly toward me. I had no desire to engage with him any further. Turning to leave, I was suddenly yanked by the wrist. Percival lowered his voice. "Warning. Eloan. Don't think that because your father arranged our marriage, I will necessarily marry you. Unless..." He fixed his gaze on me. "You go to your mother and ask her to allow Clara to join us in the palace." "And if I refuse?" Percival sneered. "Eloan. This time you'd better learn to be smart." With that, he turned and strode away. It was then that I realized. He too had been reborn. The wedding was set for a month later. My mother thought it was too rushed, but I found it too slow. Because this was a royal marriage arranged by the emperor himself. It couldn't be hasty. Every detail, from the hairpins to the gowns, had to be perfect. Considering that, the time was indeed tight, and I wasn't sure if the war in the north would end soon enough. As I pondered, the sound of tinkling jewelry came from behind the screen. My half-sister Clara, unable to resist, peeked her face around the corner, her arm and eyes gleaming with moisture. In my past life, this was the very look she wore the night Percival took his concubine. Kneeling at my door, she begged, "Please, let me serve you." "Come out," I said, curious as to how long this half-sister could pretend. In my past life, she didn't reveal her true nature until she married Percival. "Cousin," she said timidly. No wonder Percival had felt sympathy for her. "What do you want to say?" She hesitated, lifting her eyes to meet mine. Percival said, "He wants me to join you in marrying into the palace." I smiled faintly but didn't answer directly. Instead, I said, "There's a polo match in 3 days. I'll ask my mother to bring you along." Clara's eyes lit up with surprise. Thank you, cousin." With the war still raging, the marriage remained under wraps. Once the situation stabilized, I would not allow history to repeat itself. In the late spring rain, the willow catkins danced on the breeze. I stood in the corridor of the Benedict estate, watching swallows peck at the mud. Clara approached, holding a freshly steamed peach blossom cake, and when her sleeve slipped, the red mark on her wrist became visible. "Cousin, try this. I made the filling with morning dew." Her fingers, stained with a suspicious shade of rouge, reminded me of the deadly poison she had once brought me. I picked up half a cake, and out of the corner of my eye, I noticed Percival's dragon-patterned robe sleeve. "I heard you went to the Dionysi temple to pray yesterday. Was it for a marriage blessing?" Clara suddenly knocked over the porcelain plate, spilling the hot sugar filling onto her bridal gown sleeve. She cried out, pulling at my clothes. I'll clean it. "Sister, what's all this?" Percival strode toward us, his jade ornament clashing against the broken flowers scattered on the ground. He seized my wrist to inspect the burn. Yet his touch was 3 parts gentler than in my past life. "Tomorrow at the polo match. Wear that crimson riding outfit," he said. I pulled my hand away, glancing at the newly built swallow's nest on the corridor's edge. "Your Highness should remind your cousin that swallows despise anyone who touches their nest." With that, I turned and left without a backward glance. The flags fluttered at the polo grounds, and Percival shot an arrow that knocked my pearl hairpin from my head. Amidst the laughter of the aristocratic youths, he urged his horse closer. "Beg me, and I'll fetch it for you." I watched as the south pearl rolled into the grass, and suddenly, I was reminded of how he had crushed my phoenix crown in my past life. "I don't want it," I said, dismounting and trying to leave. But he blocked my path with his polo mallet. The you from the past wouldn't have behaved this way, he said, his voice mocking. Why the sudden docility? Do you want me to pamper you more? He looked down at me, pleased with himself. If I said I was willing to support you and your cousin's union, what would you say? I asked. I saw him furrow his brow slightly, confusion passing over his face. What do you mean? He asked, frowning. Since you love my cousin, you could simply go to the emperor and ask for a marriage decree. Why involve me in this? Without waiting for him to respond, I turned and walked away. I hadn't expected that he would take it as a request to seek my cousin's hand from the emperor. News of victories poured in, and the emperor's face lit up with joy. He ordered a royal banquet to be prepared. When the music and dance ceased, my uncle looked quite pleased. At that moment, Percival knelt in the middle of the hall, drawing the attention of all present. Percival, what is this about? Someone asked. I've heard news of victories in the north, and I believe the army will soon return triumphantly to the capital. I have prepared a painting of the entire kingdom as a tribute to Father Emperor, Percival explained. After hearing this, my uncle was ready to reward him. But when asked about the form of reward, Percival's words took everyone by surprise. I've long admired Clara. I beg Father Emperor to grant me her hand in marriage. I froze at those words. Such boldness in asking for a marriage decree, it was exactly his style. Even before I lifted my eyes, I could feel all eyes around me turning toward me. Murmurs and even a few laughs filled the air. The fruit wine in my hand was sweet and fragrant, and I couldn't bring myself to set it down. I took another sip, looking at my cousin beside me. She was overflowing with joy. Yet she didn't dare to voice it. My uncle glanced at me and smiled. Has Percival made up his mind? Actually, my uncle had asked me to keep the events of the back hall quiet, and I knew why. Everyone knew of my affection for Percival, and my uncle had hoped I would marry the one I loved. But he had feared my impulsiveness and suggested waiting until Percival's return to grant the marriage. However, he hadn't expected Percival to ask for my cousin's hand first. I've long admired her. I beg Father Emperor to grant me her hand in marriage. Well, if that's the case, then I will grant your request, said the emperor. The royal marriage decree was immediately issued, and my cousin couldn't wait any longer. Rising to kneel with Percival to thank the emperor, the banquet grew lively again, though more gossip filled the air. Wasn't she supposed to be in love with the first prince? Now she's letting her cousin steal the spotlight. Her cousin is so delicate and beautiful. Though she's Benedict's legitimate daughter, she's quite shameless, always sending love notes into the palace. I wouldn't be surprised if she's already crying in the carriage. Later, at the grand banquet, the empress arranged a nighttime garden stroll. The palace lanterns illuminated the entire back garden, and scattered silver stars fell into the lotus pond, spreading with the floating river lamps. I held one of the river lamps, wrote a prayer on it, and pressed it to my brow with my hands together. May you return safely, and we shall know. Before I could finish my wish, Percival's voice interrupted. Don't bother. Father Emperor has already granted me and Clara a marriage decree. You should focus on pleasing her, so I won't be too harsh on you. I released the river lamp and stood up slowly. How can you be so sure that I'm praying for you? Percival, if we could start over, do you really think I would repeat my mistakes? He scoffed coldly. Besides me, who else could you marry? This world is full of men. Why would I marry only you? I lowered my voice as I passed him. Have you ever tasted the poison wine, Your Highness? Clara had already soared into the branches, and her attitude had changed quicker than anyone could imagine. Thank you, cousin, Clara said, handing me a cup of tea. Was it the first prince who asked you to marry him before the emperor? What does that have to do with me? Why thank me? Clara smiled softly, leaning close to my ear. Don't think you're the only one who can marry Percival. Do you really believe that marrying him will bring you a good end? As she accidentally spilled the boiling tea on my wrist, the laughter of the noble women surrounded us. She knelt to wipe the spill from my dress, and the double fish pendant at her waist gleamed in the spring sunlight, clearly a piece from my mother's dowry, hidden at the bottom of her makeup chest. Don't be angry, cousin, she said. raising her face, revealing a red mark on her neck. Her voice rang clearly through the room. I tore the double-fished pendant from her waist. How is my mother's dowry in your possession? She tried to grab it back. It's my mother's. I slapped her delicate face with a sharp crack. Shameless. How dare you touch my mother's things? Clara covered half her reddened face, looking both terrified and aggrieved. Sister. Yuli too. Not far away. Percival, who had been playing a game of tossing arrows with the other young masters, heard the commotion and rushed over with his bow. He shot an arrow toward me, and I squeezed my eyes shut, bracing for the pain. Instead, I only heard the sound of wood cracking. Opening my eyes, I saw the arrow split into two, falling to the ground. Be careful, Your Highness. You wouldn't want to hurt my wife, came the voice of Gawain. Percival, seeing who it was, snorted dismissively. Ah, Geoffrey's son. Weren't you on the northern battlefield? The war is over, and I just came back early to collect my reward. Gawain replied. Well, go on and claim your reward. But don't annoy me here. Percival said. If I'm to claim a reward, I'll need the lady to accompany me. Gawain said, glancing at me with a smile. Percival frowned, sensing something was wrong. Geoffrey, be careful with your words. Eloan has already been betrothed by Father Emperor. I told you. I'm just here for my reward, Gawain said, smirking at Percival. With that, I began to walk away with Gawain. From behind, Percival's cold voice followed. Though Father Emperor hasn't issued the marriage decree yet, you still can't act recklessly. Lady, mind your place. I ignored him and walked into the main hall with Gawain. Gawain's return was met with great joy from the Emperor, and the royal marriage decree was issued immediately. Soon, let out a low sigh. The news spread across the court, through the streets, and into every corner. Benedict's legitimate daughter was to marry General Geoffrey's son, Gawain, and Percival became the subject of mockery. Everything had already been arranged, and the wedding was set to take place in 3 days. At the palace's willow pond, Percival approached with his sword raised, standing in front of Gawain. Don't think just because you're the son of the great general, I won't dare to kill you. Gawain raised an eyebrow. What's the meaning of this? Your Highness? Why did you ask Father Emperor for Eloan's hand in marriage? Percival demanded. You know perfectly well. This is the one chosen by the princess herself. In the Golden Hall that day, Gawain had arrived before me. The young general, still in his battle armor, knelt on one knee before the dragon throne. Gawain thinks the emperor should choose who will marry Eloan? The emperor stroked his jade ring, the yellow drapes casting a spider-bear-like shadow across his face. When Gawain turned, I caught a scent of cedar mixed with rust. His gaze swept over my disheveled hair, blown by the arrow's winds. This matter should naturally be decided by the princess herself. I would never presume to speak out of turn. Gawain replied. Your Majesty, Eloan has admired Geoffrey for a long time. I request that your Majesty arrange a marriage between Eloan and Geoffrey, I said, with a firm but respectful tone. A few shocked whispers echoed through the back hall. Oh? Admiring Gawain for a long time? The entire city had known of my affection for Percival, and surely my uncle the Emperor was no stranger to it. I fixed my gaze on the scar at Gawain's thumb, a mirror cleft when he led the army to break the capital in my past life. The same scar that had pressed against my throat. Gawain froze, clearly taken aback by my choice. The Emperor continued to stroke his ring, the yellow drapes casting shadows over half his face. Has Eloan thought this through? Geoffrey's family has long been stationed on the frontier. He is not like Percival, who knows how to be warm and attentive. I bowed even lower, my voice soft. I admire Geoffrey's loyalty and bravery. I wish to follow the example of Princess Bingyang and share the burdens of the Emperor. Then what does Gawain think of this? The Emperor asked, turning his attention to him. I am grateful for the Emperor's decision. Gawain bowed with one knee on the ground, his sword pressed against my loose robes. However, there is a pressing situation at the frontier. I must return to the military in 3 days. And Eloan will wait for the general's return and marry when he returns victorious. Thank you, Your Majesty, for the marriage decree. I exhaled in relief. Thank you, uncle, for granting the marriage. Upon hearing Gawain's words, Percival was momentarily stunned. He turned to me. Didn't you say you were going to marry? I cut him off. Your Highness has already asked for my cousin's hand in marriage. I'm sure your wish has been fulfilled. In a few days, my cousin will marry along with me. And you'll be able to be with her every day. Today, there are too many matters at home. I won't disturb you any longer, Your Highness. With that, I pulled Gawain away. The palace walls stretched endlessly before me. Suddenly, Gawain spoke. If the princess does not wish for this marriage, I can go to the emperor and ask him to retract his decree. I looked at him, and for some reason, I felt a sense of affection. It reminded me of how clumsy he was in my past life. Is Gawain dissatisfied with me? Of course not. The princess's status is noble, and her beauty is unparalleled in the capital. It's just that, Gawain. He hesitated, and I realized he was struggling with his own feelings. Just as he had in the past, missing his chance with me. Gawain need not worry. Since I've said I will marry you, I will. Now, little general, you should quickly return and prepare for our wedding in 3 days, I said with a reassuring smile. Upon hearing my words, Gawain's previously furrowed brow softened a little. There's one more thing Gawain wants to ask the princess. What is it? Why did the princess choose me? I could see the doubt in his eyes. And it only made me feel even more fond of him. Leaning in closer, I whispered. It's because I admire you. The night before the wedding, Clara's golden palanquin crushed the hee-hoo petals in front of the Geoffrey family home. When she lifted the curtain of the palanquin, the 12 pairs of dragon and phoenix bracelets on her wrists clinked together. Why is cousin's wedding gown so plain? Could it be that Geoffrey couldn't even afford to have gold-threaded satin made? Now that my cousin has flown to higher branches, I haven't even had the chance to congratulate her. I closed my makeup box and stared at my reflection in the bronze mirror. Clara let out a proud chuckle. Sister, you've liked Percival for so long. But in the end, he still married me. Look, this is the token Percival gave me, Clara said, pulling out a white jade hairpin. I knew it well. In my past life, Percival had given it to me as a token, only to shatter it in front of me later on. After tonight, it will be the big day. You should go back and rest. Cousin, having so wag sigh. To make sure you don't miss tomorrow's auspicious hour. Clara didn't see my frenzied expression and seemed somewhat disappointed. Yet she dared not make a scene here. Letting out a cold sniff before leaving. The candlelight burned out through the night, and the house was filled with noise. The general's mansion was decorated in bright colors. I touched the phoenix embroidered with gold thread on my wedding gown but felt an inexplicable sense of unease. Suddenly, there was commotion from the main hall as the wedding matron entered the inner courtyard. The auspicious hour has arrived. The celebrant's chant mixed with the soft sound of blades being drawn. When Gawain pressed the red silk into my palm, his fingers wound it around my wrist 3 more times. Just as the bright red veil fell over my face, I heard the wedding matron's sharp intake of breath. Gawain's hand, which had held the red silk, suddenly tightened, the bones creaking. The sound of swords clashing echoed from outside the door, mingled with the panicked screams of guests. I ripped the veil off in a panic, my gaze locking with Percival's bloodshot eyes. He held a sword, the hem of his dark wedding robe stained with spots of blood. What are you doing, Your Highness? Gawain stepped in front of me protectively. Percival's sword pointed directly at Gawain's throat, trembling slightly. His eyes were red, filled with a madness I had never seen before. Eloin, come with me. Come with me. He tore the red silk from my hands. In my past life, I was foolish. This time, I slowly shook my head, my voice firm. No. He froze. Suddenly, Percival turned the sword toward his own chest, and dark red stains spread across his wedding gown. I stared at the winding bloodstain. The image of him holding a poise and cup flashed before me. His sleeve stained with the same vermilion color. That scar you got from blocking the arrow for me. He tore open his robe, revealing an old arrow wound on his chest. Every time it rains, It aches. And I can't sleep through the night. From beneath his snake-patterned waist sash, a blood-stained peace lock fell out, the same token I had tied to Gawain's coffin in my past life. Gawain suddenly flung the red silk around the sword's hilt, and the iron wrist guard clashed with the blade, sending sparks flying. Outside the door, the sound of arrows cutting through the air filled the space. Gawain pulled me down to the wedding bed, just as 3 poisoned arrows embedded themselves in the spot where I had been standing. The arrows were marked with the insignia of Percival's secret guard. Gawain, I won't let you marry her. Not in the past life. And not in this one. Percival swung his sword to strike, but I leapt up to block him. The cold blade pierced my back. Eloin. Eloin. Gawain kicked Percival aside and scooped me into his arms. Setting me down on the wedding bed. Send my token. Summon the imperial physician to treat my wife's wounds. In our past lives, you couldn't protect her. This time, you'll pay with your life. Gawain drew his sword, thrusting straight for Percival's heart. Percival barely rolled away in time, disbelief flashing in his eyes, so he wasn't the only one who had been reborn. Before Percival could rise again, Gawain's blade came down once more. No, I tried to stop him. Whatever Percival had done, he was still a prince, he couldn't die here. The sword halted half an inch from Percival's throat. The doors burst open as the minister of justice entered with the imperial guards. The shattered wedding cup spilled across the floor like a river of blood. Clutching his wound, Percival let out a cold laugh. So the valiant General Gawain attempts to assassinate a crown prince in public? Truly, cousin Cosil went session. A bold spirit. Seize him. Percival barked. Gawain was quickly restrained, forced to his knees. I struggled to rise. My torn back wound burning like fire. But I didn't care. It was you who. Eloin. Gawain's sharp voice cut me off. Beneath his iron bracer, his fingers traced a coded message against my wedding gown. As the guards pinned him to the ground, his final glance toward me carried a faint smile. His lips moved soundlessly. Don't be afraid. 3 days later, the emperor's study filled with the faint curl of sandalwood smoke from a golden incense burner shaped like a beast's head. I knelt upon the cold tiles as Percival laid a forged military token on the desk. Your Majesty. I saw it with my own eyes. Gawain met with the northern envoy at the city god temple. The sugar figure stalled before the temple. Does your highness still remember it? I interrupted. The scroll in his hand cracked under his tightening grip. In our past life, he had stood 2 hours in the snow just to buy me a rabbit-shaped candy. The emperor's dim eyes flashed with sudden sharpness. Eloin. What do you have to say? Geoffrey spent that entire night in my chambers. I lifted my gaze, meeting Percival's twitching eyes. If your Majesty doubts me, summon the imperial physician to verify my chastity mark. Percival lunged forward, seizing my wrist so hard that the jade ring on his thumb left a red mark. You'd sacrifice your purity just to save him? His palm trembled with heat. I shook him off and struck my forehead against the floor. Please. Your Majesty, see the truth and clear my husband's name. A long silence. Then a weary sigh. 5 days. If there is no proof by then, I will not spare him. Better to err in execution than in mercy. Your Majesty's grace is boundless. I whispered, bowing low. When the hall emptied, only Percival and I remained. So you truly love him? He sneered. I'm not like you, I replied coldly. You kill without blinking. Your heart died long ago. He tilted my chin upward. Stop dreaming. 5 days won't be enough to save him. The hall grew long and silent, my shadow stretching across the golden tiles. Of course, I knew Percival's nature. I alone could never find proof. 5 days passed, and as expected, I had nothing. Before the bronze mirror, I opened my dressing chest. Inside lay the gilded dagger Gawain had given me, token of his vow. If we could not live together, then let us die as one. I went to Percival's palace, where music and laughter drowned in wine and perfumed smoke. He looked down his nose at me. Have you come to beg? I poured a cup of wine and held it out before the watching courtiers. Please, your highness, drink this cup of parting wine. Parting wine? His brow furrowed. For a lifetime of wrong love, I said softly. May we part in the next underworld. and I drew the gilded dagger from my sleeve, driving it toward him. Gasps rippled through the room. Guards rushed forward, but Percival raised his hand to stop them. "You mean to kill me?" His eyes glimmered not with anger, but with a trace of sorrow. "Kill me instead," I said, releasing the blade. "To strike a prince is unforgivable." My voice was calm, utterly resigned. Confusion flickered in his eyes. He dismissed the crowd until only we two remained. "You'd die for him? Why is he worth that much?" "Because he can die for me. So can I," he shouted, gripping my hand with fury and grief. I almost laughed through my tears. "No, you never would." Salt touched my lips, and all I tasted was bitterness. Percival imprisoned me within his inner palace. I refused food and drink until one day I awoke to the prick of needles, the physician tending to me under Percival's watchful gaze. Only when my eyes opened did his tense brows ease slightly. He waved the attendants away. "Why must you torture yourself so? Why must your highness keep saving me?" My voice was empty. "Marry me, and I'll see that Geoffrey's family is spared. Refuse and they'll be buried in the northern snows." I stared at him, aghast. The Geoffreys had served the Empire for generations. Their bones already paved the frontier. "Percival, you're evil. If I denounce you for treason with the northern tribes," he said coldly, "let's see how long you stay proud." His eyes wide, and when he realized I already knew of his dealings with the enemy. Trading 9 generations of the Geoffreys for one wedding dress seems a fair bargain. He brushed his hand against the jade hairpin Gawain had gifted me in our betrothal, smiling faintly. "The wedding will be in 2 days. Tonight. You may visit him in prison for the last time." The dungeon reeked of mildew and rot. My shadow stretched long in the pale moonlight as I stopped before the iron bars. A dead rat floated in a puddle. Reaching through the bars, I touched Gawain's blood-crusted wounds. Iron shackles bit into his ankles, carved with the word traitor. Yet his lips still curved in a faint smile. "The rouge you wear tonight, my lady, is stronger than wedding wine." Gawain. I tore open his blood-stained tunic, and when I saw the old arrow scar over his heart, my tears fell onto his fevered skin. You knew we'd live this again." He pulled me into his arms. His heart beat loud against my ear. "Percival's using my family's lives to threaten you, isn't he?" I froze. How could he know what Percival had said? "It's simple," he murmured. "Either you wear the wedding gown and enter the Eastern Palace, or tomorrow at noon, you'll see my head hung on the city wall." My fingertips traced the crescent scar over his heart, crusted with dried blood. Memories from our past life flooded back, the 3rd winter of Emperor Changping's reign. The snowstorm, the rebel's stray arrow piercing his chest, the blood freezing under moonlight like dark amber. This scar, my voice trembled, was left during the palace coup on the Lantern Festival Eve. Gawain suddenly grabbed my wrist. His blood-stained eyelashes cast shadows over his lids. Yet they couldn't hide the flickering dark fire in his eyes. So the white plum blossoms on the city wall that day were not a trick of my eyes. The iron chains clinked as he pulled half a black iron thumb ring from under the straw mat. I recognized it as the military dispatch token of the Geoffrey family's secret guards. In my previous life, he had used this to carve a path of blood for me on GQ Avenue. Now, fresh marks were clearly etched inside the ring. They were coded routes at Percival's communications with the Northern D tribe. "When did you?" My words trailed off as he suddenly tore open the prison uniform on his left arm. Beneath the grotesque whip scars, a black wolf's head tattoo flickered faintly in the candlelight. This was a special mark of the Geoffrey family's hidden agents, visible only when exposed to heat. 3 days ago, you fainted from hunger, and Percival summoned imperial physicians to consult at the Eastern Palace. Gawain's fingertips brushed the jade hairpin in my tresses, twisting the end gently thin as silk. Coded messages fluttered down. Secret guards intercepted a die falcon. These record the 3 border cities Percival promised to cede. A chill swept over my entire body. In my previous life, when Percival slaughtered the entire Geoffrey clan, he had used the charge of colluding with the enemy. So even then, the jackal had donned the crown prince's python robe. His blood-stained fingers suddenly pressed between my brows, burning like a red-hot iron. I want you to put on this wedding dress and trap the Northern D Embassy at Juku Terrace. Blood droplets slid down his nose, splattering on the map he'd drawn like tiny red plum blossoms. Secret guards have infiltrated the wedding procession. At the third watch of midnight, I want Percival to watch as beacon fires redden his path to the throne. Suddenly, the sound of a night watch drum echoed outside the dungeon. Gawain roughly pushed me toward the iron bars. Ripples stirred in the putrid ditch, reflecting the corner of Percival's robe embroidered with a golden piping. Has her grace finished reminiscing? Percival's sword flicked away the silk ribbon binding my hair, and the jade hairpin fell to the ground with a clink. I've said all I need to. I can leave now. I looked at Percival inferently, but my heart was in chaos. Gawain had already laid his trap. Percival turned to Gawain. So what if you've been reborn? You still lose. On the day of the grand wedding, red silk hung high. I stared at my elaborately made-up reflection in the bronze mirror. The golden 9 phoenix hairpin crown, inlaid with pearls, weighed heavily on my neck, sending a sharp ache. Outside the hall, the ritual officer's prolonged chant rang out. The auspicious hour has arrived. Percival stood at the red-carpeted steps. The coiled dragon embroidered in gold thread on his black wedding robe bared its fangs and claws in the sunlight. Imperial guards in cold iron armor surrounded Juku Avenue, leaving not a single gap. Commoners knelt on both sides, watching the 10-li-long wedding procession wind like a river of blood. The dragon and phoenix sedan chair, carried by 16 bearers and adorned with 800 South Sea pearls, dazzled the eyes. Eloan looks truly beautiful today. He reached out to help me, but I dodged as soon as his fingertips touched my embroidered shawl. The jade pendant at my waist chimed softly. It was the one Gawain had tied to my sash before his expedition. See this jade, and you see my heart. Dragon saliva incense curled to the wedding hall. The gilded nuptial cups, a gift from the emperor, rested on a red sandalwood table. As the ritual officer shouted for us to bow to heaven and earth, I suddenly caught a flash of cold light from the sleeve of the maid holding the wedding candles. Look out! Percival abruptly pulled me into his arms. Amidst the jingle of the crown's pearl tassels, the poisoned dagger pierced the brocade on my shoulder. Eloan, you stole His Highness today. I'll take your life. Percival's arms still encircled my waist. He kicked Clara, who charged forward, drawing his sword to face her. For the sake of your infatuation with me, I spared your life. Today is my wedding. Don't bring me bad luck. Your Highness once fell off a horse plucking plum blossoms for me. And now you want to kill me? Clara suddenly let out a mournful laugh, her crins and painted fingertips caressing her lower abdomen. Will you even abandon your own flesh and blood? Amidst the hall's uproar, Percival suddenly snatched a sword from an imperial guard. As cold light flashed, I smelled a strong stench of blood. Clara fell onto the scattered red dates and peanuts, a gash in her throat bubbling with blood that stained the mander and up brocade mat. In mere moments, the blood-stained mat beneath our feet was replaced with a new one, as if Clara had never existed. Yet he acted as if nothing had happened. Reborn once more. He was even colder-blooded. 12 pairs of gilded coiled dragon candles illuminated the wedding hall as bright as day. I stared at my reflection in the mirror, adorned with pearls and jade. The 9-tailed phoenix embroidered on my wedding dress shimmered with a bloody glow in the candlelight. At the bottom of my dressing box, the rouge case Gawain had sent held a hidden secret. Twisting the peony relief gently revealed a silver needle dipped in snake venom, casting a thin shadow on the wedding veil. Does her grace know how heavy this phoenix crown is? Percival's voice, laced with alcohol, came from behind. His fingertips brushed the back of my neck, lingering at my vital point. Exactly 9 Jin and 9 Liang. Every single least pearl is a trophy from the Geoffrey family's army conquering D-tribes. The matchmaker trembled as she brought the nuptial cups, but Percival waved everyone away. I smiled brightly at my reflection in the mirror, inserting the ray poise and jade hairpin into my hair. Your Highness surely knows arrows from the Geoffrey family's army love the moonlight reflected by East pearls? A spark suddenly popped from the gilded beast-headed incense burner. He grabbed my chin, forcing me to look up. So what? Commotion erupted outside the window. Percival's expression shifted slightly. Before he could draw his sword, a whistling arrow pierced the carved window lattice. A black silk cloth tied to its tail unfurled in the candlelight, bearing Jeffrey's distinct handwriting, "Victory at Uju 3000 and D head severed." Impossible. Percival crushed the wine cup, shards of porcelain embedding deep in his palm. Jeffrey clearly should be a headless corpse. I tore off the phoenix crown. 3 days ago, secret guards raided the northern D camp. Father is currently roasting wolf meat by the Yin Ma River. Percival suddenly choked my throat, blood surging in his eyes. You think Gawain could escape the dungeon? By now. His head should be. His words cut off abruptly, his pupils contracting sharply. Gawain had already appeared behind him. His sword pressed against Percival's neck. Your Highness. You lose. Clad in prison uniform, he was colder and more imposing than ever, his brows exuding an unrivaled arrogance. I looked at him, my heart a jumble of emotions. In my previous life, he had defied the entire imperial family for me, ultimately meeting the fate of having his entire clan executed. Eloin. I'm late. I made you suffer. He spoke softly, his gaze filled with tenderness and remorse. I shook my head, tears swirling in my eyes. No. I'm the one who dragged you down. Percival's face turned ashen. He had never imagined Gawain could escape the dungeon, let alone that his meticulously laid plan would be shattered so easily. Gawain. Do you think this means you've won? Percival ground out through gritted teeth. Gawain sneered. I've had someone deliver evidence of your collusion with the enemy state to His Majesty. What do you think the Emperor will do? Your Highness? The sword's edge drew a thin line of blood on Percival's throat. Candlelight twisted the tree of our shadows on the vermilion palace wall. I picked up the fallen pearl from the phoenix crown. My fingertips brushing the gilded coiled dragon pattern was the death ward Percival had personally placed on my head when he ascended the throne in my previous life. His Majesty has arrived. The moment the golden armored guards broke down the door, Gawain suddenly shielded me behind him. I watched as the hem of the dragon robe brushed past the blood-stained blue bricks, and the aged emperor's cloudy eyes fixed intensely on the jade belt at Percival's waist adorned with the wolf-tooth tally that the Khan of the Northern D had given to the crown prince. Rebellious son. The jade tablet struck Percival's forehead, and blood snaked down his cheek. How dare you collude with the D people and falsify military reports? Gawain sheathed his sword. The bloodstains on his prisoner's robes glinted dully in the moonlight. Your Majesty. I have recovered the sheepskin letter from the Northern D's secret envoy, as well as the military intelligence reports that were swapped 3 days ago. He untied his hair ribbon, and inside the dark patterned silk was clearly a troop dispatched alley stamped with the crown prince's seal. I stared at the festering shackle wounds on his wrist, recalling the scene from my past life when he was in the imperial prison, his shoulder blades pierced by iron chains. Back then, he had smiled at me through the prison bars and said, Eloin, don't be afraid, even as blood foam kept spilling from the corner of his mouth. Where are the warriors of the Jeffrey clan? Jeffrey's deep voice echoed from outside the hall, and the clashing of his black iron armor roared like thunder. 300 soldiers of the Jeffrey clan, escorting over 20 black-cloaked assassins, knelt before the red steps. These were precisely the hidden guards Percival had raised. The old general hurled a blood-stained battle report before the Emperor. 8,000 dead corpses are buried outside Uju city, and the arrows in their hands bear the mark of the Eastern Palace's armory. The Emperor ordered Percival to be taken away and placed under house arrest. Issue the imperial edict. The Emperor's voice aged in an instant. The crown prince has suddenly succumbed to a fatal illness and passed away. He shall be buried in the concubine mausoleum with the ceremonies of a prince. Lady Eloin, for your unwavering loyalty, you are hereby betrothed to General of the Agile Cavalry, Gawain. As the palace lanterns were extinguished one by one, Gawain removed his blood-stained prisoner's robe beneath the courtyard full of cropple trees. Moonlight fell on the hideous arrow scar over his heart that was the wound from taking an arrow from me in our past life. This time, I finally made it in time, he said, his fingertips gently brushing the red mark left by my phoenix crown. Eloin, let's go home. Outside the window, the dawn light pierced through the dark clouds, shining on the scar over his heart-haze scar that spanned to lifetimes. After my rebirth, I decisively refused to marry the rural youth. In my previous life, When I learned that the rural youth could return to the city, I, 39 weeks pregnant, rushed back to my family with my swollen belly, eager to share the news. But Jackson, who had been waiting by the river, shoved me in, and ignoring my desperate cries for help. It wasn't until my water broke and the river turned red with blood that he finally coldly uttered a few words. "You think you're something special just because you have a little money? If you want to marry my father and return to the city, you should know your place as a stepmother. My father will only ever have one child, and you'd better not have any other intentions." When Percival, who had received the news, arrived, his face was as cold as his son's. "If Jackson doesn't want siblings, then don't have any. Let the cold river water take care of that for you once and for all." I watched helplessly as the life within me became a blurred mass of blood and flesh, the pain almost suffocating. Even though I regretted marrying the wrong man and loving the wrong child, it was too late to undo it. When I opened my eyes again, I found myself back to the moment the matchmaker came to arrange the marriage. Looking at the high and mighty pair before me, I sneered. "Is this what you brought me? One, I will not marry such a vile man. Get them out of my house." The moment these words left my mouth, Jack's son's expression changed drastically. "You foolish woman. What are you saying? You, a countryside girl with no parents and an old virgin, should be honored that my father, a city-bred youth, is willing to marry you." His voice, still in its changing phase, was a rough croak that made my skin crawl. I quickly covered my ears in disgust, and Jackson immediately fell silent. He looked to Percival with a pleading expression. The matchmaker awkwardly laughed and tried to smooth things over. "Eloin, I'm not trying to embarrass you, but when I asked you who you liked before, you clearly said Jackson. Everyone in our group knows about this. Why are you changing your tune now? Scolding him?" I was stunned, remembering how, in my previous life, I had shamelessly pursued Jackson because I was infatuated with Percival. I had done many things I regret now, and the matchmaker had even taken the initiative to push us together. But after marriage, Percival had only used me as an outlet for his frustrations. The only time he had shown warmth was when he was drunk, mistaking me for his deceased first wife, and he, along with his son Jackson, had treated me with utter disdain. Just thinking about how my unborn child had been cruelly killed in the cold river by them made me want to make them pay 100 times over. But I held back. After all, it hadn't happened yet. My goal now was to avoid everything and cut ties with Percival for good. So I admitted, "Yes, I did pursue Jackson." A smile appeared on Percival's normally stoic face, and Jackson arrogantly lifted his chin at me. But before he could say anything, I quickly shifted the conversation. "But I've changed my mind. Why should I, a pure, unmarried woman, marry a divorced man and become a stepmother to such an ungrateful person? Let's not bring the child into this." Percival finally spoke, his face dark but unable to refute me. After all, I had gone to great lengths to get close to Jackson to win his favor when I was pursuing him. I gave him everything. But Jackson had never shown me any kindness. This made me the laughingstock of our neighbors. "Eloin, I know you're still angry about Jack's son's words. But he's just a child." Percival's gaze held some reproach and disapproval as he spoke. "At first, I allowed you to get close to me. Even agreed to this matchmaker meeting. Because I thought you were a kind, hardworking woman. I thought you could accept Jackson. But now I see you're no different from the other women." The matchmaker also chimed in, trying to smooth things over. All right. Eloin, Jackson may have been married before, but his wife died of illness. He raised his child alone. And he's a devoted man. Besides, once you're married and can move to the city in a year or two, you'll be able to enjoy a better life. Without Jackson, Percival would indeed be quite desirable. He was handsome, cultured, and compared to the rough men around him, he was more popular with women. Without a wife, his image as a devoted father with a child only made him more pitiful in the eyes of others. In my previous life, I had been fooled by this image. Rushing into marriage with him in my youth, without the guidance of any parents, which ultimately led to tragedy. I sneered and spoke coldly. What good is it to be handsome or devoted, if he's so poor that he couldn't even afford his wife's medical treatment? I'd have killed myself if I were him. Percival's expression changed drastically, clearly stung by my words. Although I only had a middle school education, I had money left by my parents. It had allowed me to live comfortably on my own all these years, while Percival and his son often relied on my financial support. This had only made Jackson hate me more. Don't think that just because you have a little money, you can seduce my father. No matter how rich you are, you won't live to be old. It was because Percival had always been so proud, treating money like dirt, that he couldn't even afford to save his wife. But Jackson, who hated Percival for his impotence, turned his hatred on me, his stepmother, who had cared for him as her own, buying him good food, clothes, and treating him well. Just thinking about it made me feel sick to my stomach, like swallowing a fly. Enough of this nonsense about city folk. If you're so confident in your dad's marriage, go door to door and see who's willing to marry their pure daughter to a man who's still hung up on his dead wife. I could see Jack's son's face turning green with anger as he was silenced by my words. The matchmaker, clearly uncomfortable, quickly stood up to leave. Well, since you've made up your mind, I won't push this any further. She awkwardly bid her farewell and left. Jackson opened his mouth to say something, but was stopped by Percival. Percival stared at me, his expression as calm and sorrowful as ever. Eloan, you're too angry today. Yes. You may have more money than me, but love can't be measured by wealth. Besides, everyone in the village knows you liked me. You spent a lot of money buying things for Jackson. We're already like family. Think carefully. I'm waiting for you to come to me. The Percival father and son duo are gone. But here I am, clutching my chest, feeling like my insides are about to spill out. In my previous life, I had actually sacrificed the life of my unborn child and nearly lost my own life for such a pair of ungrateful wretches. Thinking of the person who threw themselves into the river to save me, my heart swells with gratitude, but I was so distraught, so lost in my emotions, that in the end, I couldn't even remember their face. Then, when at a low sigh, I was reborn. I sat down, trying to calm myself, but I couldn't help but begin to worry. After my parents passed away in my previous life, I longed for the sense of family, which is why I was so completely captivated by Percival. It was also because everyone knew my relationship with Percival was already almost official, and they were too afraid of causing trouble to introduce me to anyone else. But now that I've driven the Percival family out, word will spread quickly through the streets and alleys. All those friends and relatives of my parents, who never gave up, would start coming around again to try to introduce other suitors, all in the hopes of seizing the savings my parents left behind, even including this house I'm currently living in. I remember when the news about the educated youth returning to the city first came out. Someone asked if I still wanted to keep this rural house after Percival and I went back to the city. I gritted my teeth. This time, whatever my parents left me, I would hold on to tightly. But reality is always cruel. Percival never showed up again, probably still waiting for me to find him. Others, however, were already eager to try their luck. Old bachelors from the village, distant relatives with idiotic foster sons, and so on, were often seen hanging around my door. There were even shameless widowers bringing their foolish sons, loudly insisting that I pick whichever one I liked and marry him. I was so angry, I trembled all over. Meanwhile, Jackson would occasionally climb the wall and spit at me, enjoying the show. If my dad had been willing to marry you, you'd only be good enough for men like these. If you're sensible, hurry up and apologize to us. I spat, picked up a stone, and pretended to throw it, scaring him off. While resting in the courtyard, a clear voice suddenly called out from outside. Eloan, comrade, are you home? I opened the door, surprised to see the young man standing there. It was Silas. I recognized him. Silas was one of the educated youths who came with Percival. Behind him was a shy girl, his sister, Leora. Eloan. Sister. Hey, I replied, trying to hold back the lump in my throat. In my previous life, when I was bringing food and clothes to Jackson, I would occasionally run into Leora, who worked with him. The way she would look at me, full of longing yet too shy to speak, made me feel a deep sense of affection. I started bringing her extra portions after that. She remembered my kindness. Every time Jackson would give me a sour face and play tricks, calling me a shameless old virgin, Leora would always frown and stop him, then obediently call me Eloan, sister. But unfortunately, later on, she jumped into the river and committed suicide. I heard it was because she had been bullied and couldn't take it anymore. After Leora's death, Silas went after the murderer for revenge, but was stopped by the police. And eventually, he lost his sanity due to the pain and grief. I sighed, remembering the sight of that once promising young man, now a homeless madman. This time around, not only did I have to save myself, but I had to do everything I could to save these siblings as well. Come in, please, I called. Silas and his sister became the only guests I had invited in for so many days. The village gossip began circulating again, with people saying I had taken a liking to Silas. After all, considering my preferences, Silas and Percival were both educated youths from the city. They even both had a little baggage with them. But Silas was more rigid in personality, and his looks and temperament were not as gentle and refined as Percival's. Instead, he had a tough and cold demeanor, with an air of potential fatherhood about him. But when he spoke, his clear voice betrayed his age. He was even 3 years younger than me. The more I looked at him, the more my heart stirred, and my smile grew wider. Silas began to feel uncomfortable, his tone a bit stiff, and half his ear turned bright red. Eloan, comrade, I brought Leora here to thank you for the many things you've given her. I have nothing to repay you with. This is wild boar meat I hunted up in the mountains. Please accept it. That's when I noticed what he was carrying. I couldn't help but gasp in admiration. Silas didn't seem like someone from the city. To go hunt a wild boar by himself, his strength and courage were truly impressive. Without thinking, I asked, "Would you marry me?" The air seemed to freeze in that instant. I awkwardly tried to clarify, "Didn't you say you wanted to repay me?" "Well, I just so happen to need a man. You also know my current situation, with people eyeing me everywhere, practically ready to devour me alive." I sighed inwardly as I spoke. At this point, it seemed like the only choice I had. I just hoped that this time, with my eyes wide open, I was choosing a path that would give me at least a glimmer of hope, better than being ambushed to death by others. Silas froze. Perhaps he had never encountered me being so direct and bold. Meanwhile, Leora had already excitedly hugged me. "My brother is willing. Eloan, sister, I like you." She slightly turned her head and tugged at Silas' sleeve. "Brother, Eloan, sister is a good person. Since she likes you, you should just go for it." Then she turned back to me and said seriously, "Eloan, sister, my brother just doesn't know how to talk, and he looks a little intimidating. But as for me, I won't be a burden to him." I affectionately patted the little girl's head. "Don't worry. Marrying me is a win-win for both sides. I'll make sure you both have a good life. And I'll even support Leora in her studies. With me, no one will ever be a burden." Without further delay, I took Silas and quickly got our marriage certificate. Looking at the photo of the two of us, I once again realized I had been reborn. And this time, I hadn't married that bastard Percival. Seeing me lost in thought, Silas, who had been holding back his joy, suddenly looked dim for a moment. He carefully asked, "Do you regret it? I know you liked Percival. And if you're only marrying me out of spite, I can help you." I shook my head vigorously, gritting my teeth. "Don't ever mention that bastard again." Though I had snapped at him, Silas' expression brightened. That same day I moved Silas and his sister into my house, and everyone in the village saw it plain as day. When asked, I boldly told them I was already married, and that we'd be holding a wedding in a couple of days. Everyone was invited to a proper feast. I didn't even need to send individual invitations. The neighbors began helping organize it on their own. After all, everyone had seen how generously I treated Jackson before there were plenty of greedy mouths eager to attend my wedding. Of course the Percival man couldn't hide from such gossip. Percival frowned as he watched Silas bustle out of my room with wedding preparations. Eloan, what do you mean by this? You're supposedly going to marry me. Yet you're living with another man? I was stunned by his self-importance and rolled my eyes. Since when did you assume I was marrying you? Percival said nothing. The night before he'd had a dream, he and I were married. I was fussing over banquet preparations and flattering his face. And they even had a child together. The later part of the dream slipped from his memory. Maybe in another life that had been their reality. This time, despite a few mishaps, Percival convinced himself I would inevitably marry him. He smiled. All right, Eloan. I know you still have feelings for me. Otherwise you wouldn't prepare our wedding so carefully. I was about to retort when a piercing scream came from the back of the house. My heart lurched. Lyora's voice. I rushed out. What I saw made fury surge through me. The village's old bachelor had his hands all over the young girl, tearing at her clothes. While Jackson clapped and cheered, I snatched up a brick and hurled it at the old man. Startled, he fled without even pulling his trousers up. I cursed as I stripped off my coat and wrapped the sobbing Lyora tightly in it. Someone objected. Eloan, why are you helping her? If she hadn't moved in with her brother at our house, outsiders wouldn't be making jokes about my father and me. I spat at him. Bah! Only scum like you would let that beast bully someone. This isn't your family, it's my home. It's mine and Silas's and Lyora's. What business is it of yours or your father's? Perhaps my change in the last few days had been too sudden. Jack's son who'd ever been treated like this before actually started to cry. His eyes reddening. You've always liked my father and said you'd be his wife. Why are you acting like this now? He clutched his scrawny belly and grew more aggrieved as he spoke. You haven't been visiting my father these days or bringing him food. I can't stomach stuff without grease. I don't care your flip-flopping has to be because Lyora had her brother flirt with you. It's all her fault. I'll kill her. His face twisted as he got more worked up. Jackson was about to lunge when I slapped him hard. Then Percival's angry voice rang out from behind. Eloan, why did you hit the child? People passing by gathered and stared. I wanted to snap back, but Lyora was trembling in my arms. I patted her, ready to take her inside. Percival tried to step forward to stop me. Eloan, say what you mean today. We're not married yet, and you go and beat Jack's son. Do you think you're going to run the world after we wed? How could I marry you if you act like this? Fortunately Silas returned and, upon learning what happened, drove Percival and his son out in a rage. He went after the old bachelor and found out that the man, frightened by my attack, had panicked, slipped, fallen into the river, and drowned. That put a stop to the matter, and a weight lifted from my chest. This life, at least, Silas and his sister were safe. The wedding was quickly prepared, and on the day Silas and I married the whole yard swelled with festivity. Even the road outside was draped with celebratory tents. Silas and I moved from table to table offering toasts. Suddenly Lyra, wearing a new floral dress, followed closely at my side. Red-eyed. She seemed to need that closeness to feel safe. When she saw me look at her, she forced a smile. I stroked her hair, about to ask if she was all right, when someone flung a pebble straight at us. Silas frowned and caught it, concerned. Are you all right? He asked. Eloan, are you really going to abandon husband and child? Percival's brow knitted. He dreamed again the night before, dreaming of a happy life, married to me in a former life, only to wake and find I had in fact married someone else. Jackson, trailing behind him, held pebbles but didn't look at me. Instead he stared at Lyora with murderous hatred. He turned to me. Awkwardly, Eloan, I'll let you be my mother. Just have Lyora and her brother leave and I'll forgive your foolishness these past days. Lyora clung to my waist, sobbing. Silas's face darkened, but his grip on my hand only tight and as if he would never let go. Today is my and Eloan's wedding. You weren't invited. Please leave, I said. Percival sneered. Why should I leave? Eloan has always liked me. Silas. Didn't we go down to the countryside together? And you stole my wife? His words dropped like thunder. And the guests began to whisper. I heard Dello and did like Jackson before everything was set for a match. Then Silas barged in. Is she too timing? That's something to be locked up for. They exaggerated my affair with the Percival S until it was ridiculous. I wanted to slap my past self for being foolish enough to get tangled with those vermin. A satisfied glint flashed in Percival's eyes as he confidently declared, Eloan, I know you're angry that Jackson disrespected you. I've already taught him a lesson. He won't do it again. With that he pushed Jackson forward. Jackson looked at me expectantly. Mama. I'm sorry. Percival curled his lips as though he'd offered me a gracious way out. Eloan. Now you can stop making trouble. Will you marry me? I'd rather die. I spat. I poured a bottle of wine over his head. What do you think you are? To even think of marrying me? I must have been blind in the past, feeding my sincerity to a dog. You still hold on to a dead man in your heart, and even when your son throws me a face. Get out of here. All of you. The more I spoke, the more agitated I became. Just the thought of being pushed into the river in my previous life, feeling the blood rushing out of my body, made my whole body ache. I glared at Jackson beside me. And you little ingrate. Even a dog I raise would wag its tail for me. You think you deserve to be my son? The faces of Percival and his son grew even paler, as if they realized that I had completely turned my back on them. The guests around us were already chiming in. Yeah. Jackson. You're really quite detestable. Eloan was a good girl. Why should she marry you and be a stepmother? Besides, you're always slacking off when doing work. You're no match for Silas. A grown man with no strength. How could he support a family? Eloan leaving you is perfectly normal. Exactly. Eloan was already kind enough to you. Today is supposed to be her joyous day. So stop making a scene. If you had any conscience, you'd let her be. The guests, aside, already eyeing the dishes on the table, couldn't wait to get the Percival family out of the way so the wedding could continue and they could happily eat. Percival was utterly humiliated. He cared most about his pride. But now, being driven away like a dog by everyone, he couldn't stand it anymore and hurriedly left with Jackson. Despite the little interruption, the wedding went on joyously. After sending off the guests, Leora clung to me, kissed my cheek, and placed my hand into Silas's. Her face was flushed. Sister-in-law. My brother and I will always take good care of you. She handed me a bracelet. This was left by our mother before she passed. Sister-in-law. I'm giving it to you as a wedding gift. From now on, we're family. Silas beside her smiled awkwardly, scratching his head. On our wedding night, when I was alone with Silas, he seemed a bit nervous. Eloan. Now that we're married, I knew that after the disturbance caused by Percival's family earlier in the day, Silas must have felt uneasy. So, I quickly reassured him. From now on, I'm your wife. Just tell me, do you like me? Are you willing to spend your life with me? Silas nodded repeatedly. The bright eyes. The gentle and bold woman before him, he felt lucky that she had chosen him. Not to mention, she had saved his sister. He gathered his courage and kissed me. The night was filled with tenderness. Though Silas didn't seem like the type to coax people, he was incredibly gentle and considerate. In contrast, when I married Percival in my past life, he initially treated me like his deceased wife. Afterward, he would turn cold. Jackson even put bugs in my bathwater. At that time, I thought it was just a father-son bond, one mourning his dead wife, the other grieving his lost mother. Both cold and dissatisfied with me. I foolishly forgave them and worked tirelessly, day in and day out. Just thinking about it now, I couldn't help but resent myself for being blind in my past life. After marrying Silas, my life became much more comfortable. Both at home and outside, Silas and Leora took care of everything. Every time I felt like helping, the two of them would kindly talk me out of it. 3 months later, when I felt unwell and called for a doctor, I was shocked to find out I was pregnant. I placed my hand on my belly, incredulous. A mix of joy and bitter sweetness flooded my heart. The shadow of my past miscarriage still occasionally loomed over me. And I guarded this child with extreme caution. Almost nervously. Silas, seeing my anxiety, would often ask the doctor about the pregnancy. After hearing that some pregnant women tend to be overly anxious, he would come up with different ways to cheer me up. Leora would obediently stay by my side, almost acting like my little nurse, worried about me at every turn. Gradually, I began to relax and enjoy this peaceful life. But then, out of the blue, Jackson appeared at my doorstep, covered in wounds. Seeing him, I froze in surprise. It had only been a few months since we last saw each other, and now winter had arrived. The cold wind was biting. Jackson wore nothing but a pair of trousers, his upper body bare, his back covered in countless scars. When he saw me approaching, he suddenly dropped to his knees in the snow, crying, "I'm sorry. I shouldn't have been so bad to you." My heart skipped a beat. A sudden thought from my past life flashed through my mind, and I cautiously asked, "What do you mean by that?" Jackson looked confused and explained, "It was my dad who said it. He said we wronged you in our past life, and that's why our fate with you is over this life. He's very ill. After beating me, he got sick. He hopes you can visit him. He said, it's all my fault." Jackson glanced at my stomach. "He said that I caused you to miscarry in the past, and it cost a life. That's why he's been restless, sick with worry, thinking that the child's spirit is haunting him." I realized that Percival had also been reborn and believed in ghosts and gods. A sense of clarity washed over me. After all, if rebirth is possible, and nothing is impossible. But what a shame about that child. My heart ached as if 1,000 needles were pricking me. Jackson, on the other hand, grew more and more anxious, shivering uncontrollably, whether from the cold or the pain of his wounds. As more curious onlookers gathered around, I didn't want to become the center of gossip. Holding back my disgust, I tossed a piece of clothing at Jackson. He was overjoyed, his eyes lighting up as he led me toward Percival. This time, without my help and patience. The Percival family had lost the cushy life they once had. Their room was cold, with drafts seeping through, and the place was filthy. No one to clean up. A faint, unpleasant odor lingered in the air. I had a bad feeling, but only relaxed when I saw that Percival was still alive in the bed. When he saw me, his eyes lit up. The foul smell was coming from beneath the blanket, where his lower half lay exposed. It turned out that without me helping him, Percival had to figure out a way to earn a living and support his family. But one day, distracted, he fell from the field. "I don't want you to be sterilized. We can't try to have another child." Jackson, standing nearby, was furious and agreed. "Dad, you promised my mom that I would be the only child." But Percival raised his hand, ready to slap him. However, Jackson, clearly holding a grudge, stepped back, and when Percival swung at him with too much force, he fell from the bed. Percival fainted immediately, and without the blanket covering him, his paralyzed lower body was exposed, covered in filth. I, already feeling nauseous from my pregnancy, couldn't help but vomit when I saw the sight. As I held my stomach, trying to steady myself, Jackson's eyes locked onto my belly, and he asked blankly, "Why do you always protect your stomach? Are you pregnant?" To avoid any surprises, I kept the news of my pregnancy well hidden. I barely managed to suppress a cold smile as I said, "Pregnant? Didn't your father already say that in a past life? You caused me to miscarry? So what? Now you want to do it again? You're disgusting." Jackson's face went deathly pale. "It's not like that. I'm just afraid that if you have another child, you'll stop loving me." I immediately reminded him, "I'm neither your mother nor your stepmother. I've never loved you. Now that I've seen your father for the last time, whether you live or die has nothing to do with me anymore." With that, I didn't look back and left without hesitation. Just thinking about my past life made me want to leave that place immediately. After leaving the Percival family's home, I unexpectedly found two people standing by the roadside, a large and a small one. Leora almost immediately ran over as soon as she saw me, but she carefully stopped about a meter away. afraid to bump into me. Behind her, Silas also relaxed and walked toward me with a smile. The snow is slippery. Let me carry you home. I felt a bit embarrassed as I hid in his embrace. How did you two? Before I could finish, Leora spoke up first. I know you're a kind person, sister-in-law. If Jackson begged you like that, you'd soften and go with him. But I was worried about you. I called my brother to come with me to find you. Please don't be angry. I smiled and patted her head. The little girl finally relaxed and skipped ahead of us. Silas didn't say anything, but I felt guilty, so I spoke up. I really have no ties with Percival anymore. Today was just to put an end to things and make them give up completely. I believe you. I stared at Silas, seeing nothing but trusting care for me in his eyes. That's when I realized how deeply a husband and wife could be connected. Thinking back to how cold Percival had been to me in my past life. How every time Jackson caused trouble and hurt me, Percival had always suspected it was my fault. Maybe in my past life, fate had meant for Silas to be mine. He just wasn't good with words. And I met Percival, who was also a sent-down youth but skilled in relationships. And that led me astray. The snow began to lighten, and as we passed the riverbank, a woman rushed toward us, crying and begging for help. My son fell into the river. I can't swim. Please save him. Without a word, Silas dived straight into the water. Leora comforted me and the woman. My brother is a great swimmer. Don't worry. He'll get him out. I anxiously watched the river. And sure enough, Silas emerged, holding the child in his arms. Seeing that the child was fine, the mother thanked us repeatedly. I hurriedly took off my coat and wrapped it around Silas. He was soaked, his face covered in muddy water, almost unrecognizable from the usually handsome young man. But at the moment our eyes met, my memory exploded. I finally saw the face of the savior from my past life. Thank you, Silas. We hurried back home and drank ginger soup to ward off the cold. Silas wrapped me tightly, his body fine, but I had caught a cold. Why are you thanking me? It's my fault. I couldn't keep you from getting sick. You and Leora stay at home. I'll go find a doctor right now. Silas was both anxious and guilty. I quickly stopped him and told him everything about my rebirth. Silas was silent for a long time, then pulled me into a tight embrace, his voice thick with emotion. Eloan, you've suffered so much. I wiped away my tears and shook my head. Maybe it's fate. In my past life, you didn't hesitate to save me. And in this life, I've changed your fate. They say good things happen to good people. Look, now we're living so well. Aren't we? Leora also came over, her eyes red as she said, Brother, sister-in-law, our family will only get better from now on. A year later, the sent-down news returned to the city. Silas and I moved to the city, and the house in the countryside was taken care of by the woman whose child Silas saved. Silas chose to go into business, while I stayed with Leora, studying. 3 years later, Leora successfully passed the entrance exam for university. She had blossomed into a beautiful young woman and often came back to act spoiled. Silas and I's daughter could already run and call out mommy and daddy. Over the years, Silas swore to create a better life for us. He never touched my money but gave me all the earnings he made to manage. Life was getting better and better. Everything was as I had imagined and in my past life pure happiness. During one Qingming holiday, when I took my family back to the countryside to pay respects to my parents, we encountered a mad beggar. Silas had gone to the car to get some paper money. Leora and my daughter Nyan were startled, and I frowned, stepping to shield them. The beggar knelt before me. Only then did I recognize him. It was Jackson. A few years ago, I had heard that Percival had died of illness before he could return to the city. Jackson had become an orphan because of his bad temper, and no one in the village would take him in. On the day of Percival's burial, Jackson suddenly went mad, shouting that my mother is Eloan. She won't abandon me. I knew then he had probably also been reborn. Sure enough, Jackson cried as he looked up at me. I'm sorry. Mom, Eloan. I was wrong in my past life. I shouldn't have pushed you. I know now. Before, When Percival told him it was Jackson who pushed the pregnant Owen into the river in their past life, he only felt he needed to apologize to me but didn't really grasp the weight of it. But now that he had his past life's memories, everything felt like it had happened, and just yesterday Owen's tear-filled, desperate cries were still vivid in his mind. Jackson suddenly became fearful. This life, Owen no longer wanted to be a stepmother. And in fact, she might wish him dead. What would he do now? No one would cover for him anymore. I remained silent, disgusted, and pushed Jack's son's hand off mine. Get away. Jackson was no longer a child. He now looked more and more like Percival. And just seeing him made me feel sick. Jackson timidly released his grip, his stiff neck turning toward Leora behind me, and shifting his gaze to my daughter. Nian was a bright, fearless little girl who knew nothing of the past. Once her initial fright faded, she beamed at Jackson with a radiant smile. But Jackson let out a terrified cry and scrambled backward, tumbling to the ground in panic. He seemed utterly unhinged, muttering incoherently under his breath, "I didn't mean to kill you back then. I was just scared you'd take away my father's love. Don't come any closer." Nian looked at me, her eyes brimming with confusion and hurt. I reached out to pat her soft little head and sighed. Every year, I had offered prayers for the child I lost in my previous life, wishing his soul might find peace and be reborn into a kind family. But seeing Jackson and Percival both so terrified, so haunted by guilt, I couldn't help wondering, had that child really never left them? I glanced around uneasily, half in doubt, half in curiosity. Leora cleared her throat lightly, looking embarrassed as she spoke. "Sister-in-law, there aren't really any ghosts or spirits. I only happened to overhear Percival once when I passed by his place. I thought being reborn might make him repent. But he was still the same beast as before." Anger flickered in her eyes. "So I decided to scare him a little to help you get some justice." She gave Jackson a complicated look. "But as for him, I didn't even get the chance to do anything. Seems his own guilty conscience did the job for me." "Owen," Silas's voice called out. He had returned and was waving at us with a bright smile. I cast one last glance at the crazed, pleading Jackson, then took Leora's hand and Nian's, and walked toward Silas. The end.